Hello and happy Friday. This is Mixture of Experts, and I am your host, Tim Hwang. Each week, Mixture of Experts brings together a world-class panel of technologists, engineers, and more to help make sense of the tidal wave of news each week in AI. This week on the show, we cover two big stories. First, Meta strikes back with the launch of Llama 3.1, and Zuck is out with a brand new look. We talk about the state of the art in language models and open source, and we talk about the implications on the business of AI and on AI safety.
This is going to be game changer for the market because it's enabling the open source community to start building using a very powerful model that is available to them to create smaller models and put it back to the market.
Second, OpenAI continues its string of launches with GPT-4o Mini, a relatively tiny, wildly cheap model. We talk about the ongoing frontier model price war and how sustainable it is over the long run.
Chris, did I hear you say embedded models, OpenAI on device? That's the use case that I can't solve. OpenAI is an API.
I think they'll get there.
As always, I'm joined by an incredible group of panelists that will help us navigate what has been another action-packed week in AI. So today we've got three panelists. We've got Shobhit Varshney, Senior Partner Consulting, AI for US, Canada, and LATAM. We've got Chris Hay, Distinguished Engineer, and is the CTO of Customer Transformation. And finally, joining us for the first time is Maryam Ashoori, Director of Product Management at WatsonX.ai. So our first story today, of course, is the launch of Llama 3.1. This is obviously an enormous technical milestone. It's the first time, arguably, that we've had frontier AI models that are available in the open source. And we're going to talk all about the technical aspects of this and why you should care as a listener. I think to just get us started, though, I think one of the things that I also loved about the announcement is that Mark Zuckerberg personally took to Facebook to announce this. And he did not only debut Llama 3.1, but he also debuted like a new look. If you remember kind of classic version Mark Zuckerberg, like very pale, very serious, very nerdy looking, with the hoodie. But he's been looking real like kind of like surf beach guy, is kind of his new look. So I think just to start, I want to ask each of the panelists, do you like the old Zuck look or do you like the new Zuck look better? Chris, to you first. Old Zuck, new Zuck.
New Zuck.
Shobhit.
New is the new cool.
And last but not least, Maryam, what do you think? Old Zuck, new Zuck?
I'd go for new.
Okay, so we have bold consensus on the new Zuck. I think we're going to come to miss the old Zuck. I really like old nerdy Zuck. But again, seasons change and we have to go with it. So let me just introduce the story of today. If you haven't been watching the news or if you're even remotely related with AI, I think you'll know that Meta has come out and launched Llama 3.1. It is the latest edition of its Llama class of models. And uniquely Meta, in comparison to, say, OpenAI or Anthropic, really is kind of pursuing open source AI in a very big way. And I think one really big thing that we've seen is the launch of the gigantic sort of Llama 405B model, which is a highly capable model, state of the art, and now just available for free in the open source. And I think the first person I want to kind of turn to was Maryam. You were working on this on day one of the launch for WatsonX. And I'd love to just for you to talk a little bit about that, right? Because it was really easy, right? You just kind of threw it up and, people downloaded it. I'm kidding, of course. I'm kind of curious just get your war story of what that felt like to launch a model like that. And if there's anything you learned or walked away with from that experience.
It was actually nothing that I call easy, especially because it's a giant model. So we had to run it across nodes, multi-node inferencing. This was the first time that we had such a 400 billion parameter models on our platform. But it was exciting, and I'm super excited, not just for our customers, but also for the community. I think the amazing thing that Meta did yesterday with Llama 3.5 405 billion. The name is getting longer and longer.
Yeah, they really need to work on the branding for all of these.
I know.
It's 6.7. I don't even know what's going on.
It's changing the license to let the market to use the model for distillation and teaching smaller models. This is going to be game changer for the market because it's enabling the open source community to start building using a very powerful model that is available to them to create smaller models and put it back to the market. So for that reason, I'm super excited for the opportunity it unlocks.
Yeah, I think I'm thrilled by it just because I think for a long time open source, has been very exciting, but arguably has not been it's been lagging a little bit in performance. And now suddenly there's what looks to be the possibility that the open source is going to be just as powerful, just as exciting, just as state of the art in a lot of ways. Can I just ask a question on behalf of the listeners who may be less familiar with this space, which is why is Meta doing this? It's incredibly expensive to build one of these models. And if I have it right, they're literally just giving it away for free, which I'm not a big city business guy, but I don't even know why that works. I don't know if Shobhit, you want to comment on what is going on here? Why is Meta doing this? And do we think they could make money on this? They're losing money, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are certain clients, certain vendors like Meta or NVIDIA that have other sources of revenue. Right? What they sell by selling the model is going to be a rounding error as compared to what NVIDIA is going to do with hardware. So they're giving away the Nimitron with Meta. They have all these other social properties that they make money on. So let's give you a quick data point on Meta itself. Yuan, the chief AI scientist at Meta, absolutely incredible personality. He was sharing a data point on before 2 years back, when somebody's posting something on Facebook and you're trying to figure out if there's misinformation or hate crime abuse and things of that nature, the NLP best in class would give you about 24, 25% hit on identifying that as some bad content. Now with the Llama models, they're getting close to 92, 94%. So they're able to do a lot more good in filtering with their models. And they're able to use that to enhance their own products, right? When you're experiencing Instagram or WhatsApp or Facebook, they're embedding AI that is now being helped by the entire crowdsourcing of everybody else, right? So they have different avenues of revenue. So for them, this is not a lost leader product, so to say. They're trying to figure out a right community around it that can build towards it, contribute, and they are benefiting in their products by using this AI. So in the very, very small subset of vendors who can potentially do this, Google, AWS, Azure, IBM, we're all in the business of selling the AI to other businesses, right? So you won't come to a point where you can just open up your models. And then IBM comes in and says, you know what? Mic drop, I'm going to open source my Granite models as well. We want the community to come and help. So this market is about split between companies like Meta and IBM who are opening up the models completely versus the closed source models.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of the question that really is in my mind is, the kind of pressure this creates for the closed source models, right? Because I think on some level, it's kind of look, if you're OpenAI, you're we've got this crazy, machine intelligence, and we're going to rent you access to it, right? And this in some ways kind of flips the whole thing on its head, right? It basically says, look, access to that is going to be free. And I guess, Maryam, I'm curious as someone who's kind of in the space, do you think that this is ultimately going to force an OpenAI or an Anthropic to also have to go open source in the end? Because it feels like once it's free, why would you pay for Claude or something like that?
Well, look what Mistral did yesterday with Mistral Large 2. They put it out, the weights, for research only. This is their flagship model. We've been having a lot of conversation in the past about protecting the weights to make sure that it doesn't go out. And here it is. It's out for research only. Cohere did something similar a few months ago. So I'd say the trend, where the trend is going, is to nurture that openness, but reserve the rights for commercial purposes.
I think the final item we might want to touch on before we jump here is, Maryam, you kind of pointed out Mistral was kind of moving in a very similar direction here in terms of their kind of licensing and research. Presumably part of that research licensing is also to say, hey, you can red team this model, you can make it better, you can surface all the safety issues. I'm curious about how you see kind of platforms like Mistral kind of falling into this ecosystem, right? Because they are not one of the really big corporate players, right? But they still seem to be really kind of being able to kind of ride this open source wave. Curious if you kind of thoughts about how they'll fit into the competition here as it continues to evolve.
I think it's important to think about what problem each of these model providers are solving. If you look into Mistral, they are Europe-born, Favorite of the Europe. So that's the market. They are supporting a wide range of European languages, not a specific dialect, but a wide range over there. So if you're in Europe, if you're speaking that language, there is a way higher chance that Mistral is a better positions model for you. So I think it's important to understand what the use case is, who is going to be using it, and then what is the right model for that target use case versus generalizing of, hey, is Mistral Large better than Anthropic?
So I'm going to move us on to the second story that we're going to cover today. We could obviously be talking a lot more about this, but I think almost we're going to flip to the other big dimension that we see kind of evolving in the AI market. So one of them is from closed to open, right? Which I think is definitely a big shift. And 3.1 really just puts a big meta flag, on that change. I think the other big change that we've been tracking, and we've been talking about it in the last few episodes, but I want to hit on it really hard, is basically the movement from gigantic models to very little models, right? Very fast, very cheap, and smaller models. And the kind of peg for this is just last week, OpenAI announced their latest salvo in this battle, which is a model called GPT-4o Mini. To Maryam, your earlier point about they really got to improve the name on these, but that's what they released. And I think what was so striking about this announcement is that the pricing is legitimately crazy. It's 15 cents per 1 million input tokens, 60 cents per 1 million output tokens. And they point out in their blog post that since 2022, the cost per token have dropped 99%. And I think the first question I just want to launch with, and Chris, maybe you're well positioned to answer this, is, are we just in a price war here? Is this even sustainable? I'm kind of curious about how much of this is OpenAI really being able to cut the costs of serving low enough that they can offer these models still at a profit, versus them just really kind of in this big, just pushing the price to zero battle against their rivals. Because it kind of feels like this is also part of the open source competition as well, right? Is how can we offer free to keep up with all the other free options that are happening out in the world? And so, I guess, Chris, to you, kind of do you think we're in a price war?
I think we are a little bit in a price war. I think OpenAI has some other considerations as well, because although we've spent all of our time playing with GPT-4, GPT-4o, I think the reality is the vast majority of people are running GPT 3.5, which is a bigger model. And realistically, OpenAI had to remove their free model and run a cheaper model. And actually, that's kind of what they've done there with GPT-4o Mini. So yeah, wonderful. Here we go. We're so great. Here's a cheaper model, etc. But actually, they managed to get all of the very large GPT-3.5 off of their books. And now they're running a smaller model to be able to serve the majority of the requests that are hitting ChatGPT. So I think they needed to do that just for kind of commercial reasons. I think we are pushing towards smaller models all the time. The only time you really need the larger models is for reasoning and planning, right? For the smaller models, most of the time with good fine tuning, you can get the model to do what you want. And I think OpenAI realized it as well. The world realizes that. OpenAI has already seen that a lot of people start with GPT-4 or GPT-4o as their starter model when they're in the enterprise, but very quickly when they go to production, they bring it down to a smaller model. And that's been eating their lunch, and they wanted to stop that as well. So, and then as we move to devices, embedded devices, they need to be able to play in that space. So it's critically important for OpenAI to have that smaller model in the market space. So I think that's great, but is it a price war? Partially, but it's also a cred war as well.
Chris, did I hear you say embedded models, OpenAI on device? That's the use case that I can't solve. OpenAI is an API.
I think they'll get there. If you really think about this for a second, so if we take a guess at what size the O Mini model is, it's probably around the 11 billion parameter mark, right? Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. There is going to come a point when you start dealing with Apple, when you start dealing with Google, etc., you are going to have to provide a model at some point to run on a device. And if you don't, you're going to be locked out of a market. We've already seen that with the iPhone and their recent announcements. So they are going to have to do something in that space. I think this is a move towards that. No doubt. So they're not offering embedded just now, but they will in the future.
Yeah, I think that definitely is going to happen. I think also another thing, and Chris, and what you're saying is, do we have too much intelligence now. This is kind of where you're pointing towards, right? And Maryam, I don't know if you agree, as kind of someone who's working on Watson X, is like, it's almost like there's some level where it's like, oh, why don't you want the bigger and better model? It can do so many more things. But I guess kind of, Chris, you're making the argument that like maybe we don't really need those things. Like there's almost basically like we've now passed the point. Our models are so capable now that like actually they're past the point of like what we actually need on an everyday basis.
Well, think about it. The larger the model, the more powerful it is, but also the larger compute resources it needs. It translates to latency. That's response time. If you're an enterprise, you want to use it in production. That translates to carbon footprint and energy consumption. That is the topic of conversation these days. And that translates to cost. So cost is actually just one of the factors. So in some highly regulated environments, it might be even the other two might be a bigger blocker to move forward. But the comment that you made about the price, I feel like there are twofold to this. If you're a model provider, you want to set the price as much as you can to increase the adoption. If you are a consumer of those, we see half of the market has already moved from exploration to pilots and 10% to production. That when you get to a scale, the cost adds up. Like if you think about that for normal prediction use cases, you might be having like 500,000 predictions a day. If you're a DoorDash or I used to work for Lyft. So in those environments, if you want to use Gen AI, just do the calculation, price per API call, it adds up. So it's really not sustainable. So in order to get it to production and scale, model provider has to like find a way to set the price low. And the way that we can implement it is usually moving through smaller platform. So it's sort of driving the demand is driving where the market is going, but also this is the right thing for the whole market to do.
And Maryam, just to add to that, right? So this week as well, OpenAI added the ability to fine-tune their mini model. And I have to think these two things are related, right? Because when you go to production, as you say, Maryam, one of the things you're going to want to do to bring that inference down and improve the reliability is take that model and fine-tune it with your data rather than having large prompts.
Yeah, seeing in the market emerging for enterprise is grabbing a much smaller, trusted models, I would say, and fine-tune it on their proprietary data, the data about their users and the data about the domain, because at the end of the day, they want to have something differentiated in the market, because these large models, everyone has access to that. And the power of differentiation is really the proprietary data. In order to do that, you should be able to fine-tune it with the data that no one else has access to.
Yeah, Maryam and I, we were on a call with a client yesterday, and we got into this nice argument. He just started off by saying, he's the head of AI for a big Fortune company. And he started off by saying that, hey, I expect these models to be intelligent, so I don't like the small ones. I really want big, large ones so they can actually do something meaningful for me. And we had a nice chat with him, explaining him how this whole pricing and stuff like that work. Let's take an example for just the pricing part, Maryam. And this is something that you and I do quite a bit on Excel, trying to showcase the range, right? And your favorite example is, let's take a 30-minute recording of a call, and let's summarize it into one page, right? And if you look at some of the tokens, make some assumptions around that. Let's do this 1,000 times, right? So 1,000 times you're summarizing a call transcript into a page. With the 4.0 mini model, that is $1. And if you look at the best-in-class models from Claude and 4.0, that is about $30 to $40, right? So you get quite a bit of a range. And then you bring in the Llama model, the biggest one, and the 405 billion parameter model, it's going to be $80. So now you have an open source model that's costing $80 for those 1,000 summarizations. You have the best-in-class frontiers that are half of that at $40. And then you have $1 if you're using the 4.0 mini. Even hosting your own models, if you're hosting a Llama 8 model, which is much smaller than the 4.0 mini, hosting your own model on AWS, Azure, IBM, Google's of the world, that's going to be like $3, $4 for you. So now you have, just look at the price points. $1 OpenAI mini, you don't have to have any headache on what's happening. They're giving you all kinds of indemnifications. They'll give you ways of fine-tuning it, make it your own. $1. $3, $4 is the free, really small Llama 3, 8 billion parameter models. Then there's $40 if you're doing the best in class, and there's $80 if you're doing the biggest Llama model open source. So it becomes very real when you start doing 1 million of these a day.
So we have to wrap up. We're almost at time. Of course, as always, we could spend a lot more time talking about this. I think one of the most interesting things coming out of this conversation is maybe it becomes worth less and less to train bigger and bigger models. And so here's my spicy take. I want to end with a yes or no question, which is at some point in the future, will OpenAI stop training larger and larger models and just focus on the models they have? Chris.
OpenAI is going to build a model that's powered by the sun in the future.
Got it. Shobhit.
OpenAI will keep going at it. There's a lot more to be done to get to human intelligence.
And Maryam.
The regulations is going to stop that at some point.
Wow. Okay. So at some point, OpenAI will stop. Well, a lot more to get into there. Maryam, we'll just have to have you back on the show at some point, regrettably. But I hope you had a good time. Chris, Shobhit, again, thanks for joining us. And for all you listeners out there, thanks for joining us as well. If you enjoyed what you heard, you can get us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast platforms everywhere. And we'll see you next week.